Oh, hello, and welcome to Al Dente Rigamortis. I'm Review Cultist, and we have some guests.
So this is the time for me to work on an announcer voice. So, hello, I'm Adam from the Role Playing Exchange, making my second appearance on the podcast. Great to be here.
And I'm Travis. You all should know me from the various stuff I do. I don't know what appearance number I'm at now. I'm basically a freelancer for anybody in the RPPR realm or tabletop realm that's interested in me running things or talking about media. I'm also a PhD student, so prepare for some overanalyzation. Yeah.
Help it. To quote somebody else, you are a podcast mercenary.
You put that on my
resume.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah. No, always glad to have you guys. You guys are honorary guest hosts to Al Dente, so.
Awesome. I like the honorific.
Mm-hmm. And so what has brought us... we're here to discuss those creepypastas, or those stories most creepy and most pasta, and be critically silly doing it, yada, 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 yada. As you guys may have guessed, whoever's listening to this, this is not your dad. This ain't your dad's El Dente Rigor Mortis. We have some hosts, so we're doing a special thing. I've been talking with Adam and Travis regarding creepypastas from our home states / provinces. Mm-hmm. And we've decided to do like kind of a series of ones where we choose a creepypasta from one of the states or provinces we're from, and we'll discuss it on an episode.
Yeah. So, and this one in particular, I believe that I found it, and I was like, "Ooh, Kentucky," and I threw it your way.
Yeah, I'm also pretty sure this is the progenitor of that idea. Just because,
honestly, mine is interesting for how the creepypasta isn't nearly as creepy as the actual real life location as it's set in.
Yeah, and then mine's probably just going to be one about Algonquin Park in Ontario. But yeah, like this one, because you sent me not just this one, but like another one set in like Slade, Kentucky.
Yeah.
And we've been talking off and on about like other like doing game scenarios / creepypastas in Kentucky and stuff like that. And then like again, we decided to start off this whole thing with the strange case of Edmonson, Kentucky. So I guess we'll just dive into this one. It's by Joe Terrell on creepypasta.com, and is kind of like an essay or article style format of narrative where we get information about how this town, Edmonson, Kentucky, went missing in 1962.
Yes.
Yeah. October 16th.
Yeah, overnight. The people just vanished. And all the animals. Well, most of the animals. We'll get into that. And what happened was like basically a farmer went to go into town, found that the town was completely deserted, went to the next town over, Clement, and got the cops basically involved, and they went in and searched the entire town and couldn't find any trace of where anybody had gone outside of a few very eerie and creepy hints and clues that didn't really amount to anything until like decades later. After an extensive FBI investigation, and the town basically got shoved under the rug, like the mystery, in the wake of larger scale mysteries and crises in America. Mm-hmm. And it kind of remained relatively obscure, like Atlas Obscura levels of like urban legend and just local legend in Kentucky until the 80s, when a couple were backpacking into the ghost town, heavily forested and basically off the map. And they discovered in the remaining church that was there a bunker, or a door down into a cavern system. And it's in this cave system that the one backpacker went through a tunnel system and found like a blocked off area, but they heard music and they found some human artifacts, like glasses and shoes, on their side of the tunnel that had caved in. So then they decided to take that to the what was it called, Mammoth Caves National Park, and then there was a little bit more of investigation going on regarding, like, again, kind of opened up the case again, but nothing really amounted to anything because the cave-in was like 100 feet thick, and no one could have, like, without extensive explosives, they couldn't really breach that cave-in, and no one's been able to find the other side of that cave system in the Mammoth Caves, because Mammoth Caves are just so expansive, and there's like tons of recesses of there that we still haven't discovered. And then we cut to the 90s, or the late 90s, early 2000s, where we get the story of, was his name Dennis Mills? Or
Dennis Miller.
Dennis Miller, yeah. And when he was 7, him and his parents were camping 3 miles north of Edmonson's location, and his parents went missing and left him in a tent and to fend for himself for 2 days before he was found by campers. And this brought on an obsession of his that lasted until the present time, where he has set up a historical society for Edmonson in his search to find the truth behind what happened to his parents, who took his parents, because he believes that the town went underground fearing the nuclear the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Yeah.
And some of the generations have passed in where they survived underground, and now they come up from the cave systems around Edmonson and hunt people and like take them back down for either food or gene pool resources.
Yeah.
And so he goes out there every so often and will like hunt down or like look around for clues or entryways into these tunnels and like to try and track them. But he never stays out beyond light beyond when the sun starts dipping down because just of the risk.
Yeah,
and
it's like these people have obviously they've adapted to a nocturnal kind of lifestyle.
Yeah. And that's basically the gist of the story. That's actually where it ends. This is basically the Mr. Miller just like saying like, I don't go into those woods after dark, not ever again.
And I think the really cool thing, and I'd like to kind of start this conversation off with, like we back in the in history of literature, like when you get around Romantic period. Now I'm starting way back, and I'm gonna work my way up here. Now,
thousands of years ago, sorry.
Back in the day, but when you have Dracula, when you have Frankenstein and stuff like that, and even in a lot of the other literature and artwork and stuff like that, there's this emphasis on returning to nature, but there's always like this kind of sinister like element to it, and that's definitely what this is hitting on. Mammoth Cave is basically, I think they think 600 miles worth of cave system, which I've actually been to Mammoth Cave before.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it's awe-inspiring and stuff like that, but like you're deep underground as you go through it. There's like really like different levels of tours that you could take through there. There's one where you can just walk around and that's great. And then there's one that like, there's no way in fucking hell you could get me to do it. And it's like you're crawling between crevasses and, stuff like that. And I'm not going to do that kind of crazy stuff, but
yeah,
there's this real like isolation, like you're away from everything else kind of, fear that this plays on. This town itself is isolated to begin with. I mean, the farmer who finds it lived,
14 miles, I believe.
14 miles, but this is with it's a rural setting, and I don't even think that like the roads had really opened up it through the region up until later on and stuff like that. So it would be like windy country roads and stuff like that, not like interstate or like highway or anything like that. So I mean, they're deeply separated. I'm trying to think of any other big bullet points. Excuse me. You
Well,
want
I mean,
that out?
it definitely plays on like because the Mammoth Cave stuff. It does definitely plays on like claustrophobia, or like kind of in the same vein as like Ted the Caver. A creepypasta about like caving, just like how like small and tight those recesses were.
Yeah, and I thought I had a great idea and it just died on me. I apologize.
Oh no.
Well,
But-
I'll pick up what you're putting down because I'm actually what you're describing is actually what I was going to bring into is the idea that I've talked about this before. If you've heard me do the spiel before, you're allowed to pause it for the next 2 seconds. Internet, or mute me. Essentially, horror is a great snapshot of the culture of the time, especially in the United States, because horror is almost a better snapshot of what America is thinking as a culture than what it presents to the world. And so creepypastas are actually really interesting for that because where you have to get an iconic film like Friday the 13th or Insidious or The Exorcist, creepypastas allow for like almost rapid snapshots of where the world is sitting. What you were talking about, Adam, of the idea of this is a kind of a romantic story of return to the nature, but at the same time sinister, falls in line with the idea that if this guy is born in the 80s, he's a person that's starting to do some writing about the New Romantics. Boy George, all of them. New Romantics is an actual philosophical aesthetic that arose during the late 19th, early 20th century, and then kind of continued in the 80s with the music. Yeah. So that might have been a thing that has inspired him. And also, this entire piece is a snapshot of a lot of the fears of the 2016 and really modern America in this very interesting diegetic piece. Also created from a bunch of pieces of previous horror media, maybe through inspiration, maybe just through background noise that filtered out through the keyboard to the final product to make this piece that we're reading here.
Yeah, because there are a lot of there's a lot of inklings of pop culture referencey things, like probably not even direct, like or like intentional, but like unintentional, like reference points as I was reading it anyway, of like movies and stories that I've come across in my viewing of like horror.
Yeah, and it's not an outright copy. It's one of those that these things showed up and are in the cultural psyche and zeitgeist, and it's kind of filtered through and become our lexicon. So you can't really say he's stealing anything as much as he's drawing from the inspirations of mass media and slowly stitching them together into new work, synthesizing it. Like, for instance, at the very beginning when they're talking about the disappearance, it reads very similar to the idea of Dean Koontz's Phantoms. More specifically drawn towards the book, which was published in 1983, than the film of this town. Things go wrong. There's a Lovecraftian inspiration baked into it. And at a certain point, everything has disappeared. It looks like people have literally just disappeared at dinner. And then you go on, you have the idea that, it mentions that there is an investigation and it kind of swept under the rug due to the cultural climate of the crisis, the nuclear crisis and John F. Kennedy, which is very much harkens back to our distrust of the government around that time. And then finally it ends with this personal obsession of like, no, these people that disappeared are actually still here, are still affecting it. And it, from my experiences, reads like somebody realizing the rise of the religious right or some type of that insidious nature that something happened to the church to change it into something not entirely wholesome that is now affecting the outer world in a way that is very scary, but without having a tangible identity or maybe not even real.
Yeah.
Especially in that era of 2016.
What the war, and I noticed this kind of picking up, and I've started highlighting everything through the beginning of this all the way down. So we're started in 61, 62 around there with Cuban War, like Red Scare pretty much, and then you also find out about the history of the town. It's Edmonson is the name of the county as well. It's a town, and Edmonson was actually founded in the wake of Battle of 1812 after a general that Edmonson
died during the war, I think.
That died during the war. So it's like it's kind of interesting that like even the birth of this place was violent and war and fear and so forth, and then its undoing in the 60s, over 100 years later, is still like war. Like the descendants of that town, which was like 263 or something like that, it mentioned in the story, they're all descendants of the people who were in that region who fought in the War of 1812. And I don't know, it's kind of like a sins of the father thing, but like I think heredity really plays a huge part in this kind of story, starting from there. And then you get this, as time goes on and you get to the 80s and then all the really creepy stuff starts happening, you start getting this Lovecraftian, which actually Lovecraft set a story in Mammoth Cave, like one of his first stories. It's shit.
I want to say it's The Thing in the Cave, or
the thing in the cave, but I'm really like that's his first one. But this really seems almost like lurking fear.
Yes, the Martens kin under like the subhuman, or the degenerate humans that live underground.
Yeah. So the product of this war, and then the product of them going underground, have like really created this degenerate sect of predators or whatnot. So it's just kind of that's really cool, like the way that it does it.
You actually are hitting on a good point that I didn't even pick up until you were saying it, is like if you look at the history of this place, it's already pretty incestuous. Because like when it disappeared, everyone's like, well, everyone in the town knows each other because they're from the same stock of the original founder. And it's almost as if this is just the event creates a funnel that down now that they it gets more and more incestuous till we get the things in the cave situation, and then the implication at the end that they're hunting people for genetic material or food is like after a certain point they're still trying to keep their incestuous nature and not change with the outside world out of fear for some reason, and just that baked in evil of the incest is still playing a key part to makes this thing kind of creepy.
Yeah, like it's also it was The Beast in the Cave by Lovecraft.
Beast in the Cave, okay.
But it's almost got like a Morlocks or like kind of the cliche or trope in like horror Americana of like the redneck or like the degenerate like hill folk kind of thing too.
Yeah.
Like you were saying earlier, it's this town is basically born, died, or like born, killed, and reborn of violence. Like it was born of like I said, of the founders that were all like from or like took inspiration from like the Civil War. Not the Civil War, the 1812 general. They fled out and basically killed their town because of the panic of nuclear annihilation and war. And then now they are violent, predatory hunters, essentially, from underground.
Yeah. And, this is, from being a Kentucky native. And, as Kentucky is depicted in most, well, I wouldn't say most, but, it seems like more often than not, like when you're depicting this region and like you got the Deliverance, which, you've got the incestuous deranged hillbillies.
Yeah.
Even in genres that are not horror, like I can think of the same. Oh God, what's the Taken guy's name?
Liam Neeson.
Liam Neeson and Patrick Swayze. There was a movie in the late '80s called Next of Kin, which is about like people from Eastern Kentucky like taking on the mob because of like a blood oath kind of thing like that. Like even in those kind of depictions, there's like this cartoonized kind of, men in the mountains that are handling snakes and, even when they're the good guys, they're the, less desirable ones, kind of stuff like that. And, and all that stuff tends to be separate, like eastern, like the mountainous region, and Western Kentucky really isn't, like that. Even though there's the huge cave systems and stuff like that, it's not like, the deep part of Appalachia over there. And, I felt like that was a unique kind of divorce from, like, you're taking this stereotype and just moving it over to the other side of the state, which is something I haven't really noticed much of, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I felt it was tasteful. I mean, I can get over the trope. It's
it's promoting the myth
Yeah.
of like the Appalachia being horrifying and like the
and it's even when, like, I don't know if Travis, have you ever been to like Gatlinburg, Tennessee, Travis?
Yes.
Okay, so they actually have, and it's just kind of give you this idea, this myth, like there is a like dinner theater thing. There's like several different little dinner theaters. Gatlinburg is a just big tourist trap of just shops, outlet malls, and just moonshine distilleries, and you can watch people make saltwater taffy in a landlocked state, kind of weird things like that. But there's like this Hatfield and McCoy like dinner theater where these actors will sit there and dress up like crazy ass hillbillies and, do some comical little feud for your dinner, for your amusement and stuff like that, which seems, exploitative, I guess you can say.
And it is exploitative.
Yeah.
Part of a friend of mine is at Necronomicon right now, but their work actually deals with trying to deal with and repair the image of the Appalachians that has developed in the cultural identity, like the dumb hick hillbillies, the guys of the mountain, or the dumb coal miners, the people that are too stubborn to refuse to move forward. Like, this is a thing that has been baked into the cultural idea, not because it's not untrue, but because at a certain point, these are self-sufficient individuals that live there, that live hard lives, and they, at one point, this might be true, but at another point, it's what's necessary to survive. And what they do, is try to recontextualize these myths and these works, and recontextualize them into modern works to show that there is actually a lot more complexity to these situations. Specifically, she uses science fiction to do this, to showcase the actual issues, all these people work in a coal mine. Well, the coal mine owns the county, owns half the state. This is the only way to get money. I have to work here. And if I leave, well, I have to deal with family, friends, and what that have lived off this for forever. The company going after me and having to find something else, and showing the actual complexities of the situation that are grossly painted over and wholeheartedly ignored in stories of the Appalachians.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which I think this actually would be a good segue over to something I wanted to discuss with the story. So we have this isolationist kind of set up in the very get-go, just geographically. And, everyone disappears and so forth. And did you, one of the big things in Kentucky, and this is true, it's a very, to my chagrin, it's a very conservative state. We as Kentuckians tend to, to be quite frank, we will literally throw the baby out with the bathwater for, these values that we take into, such as, religion, and abortion's a really big thing here, and the religion in general and conservative values and stuff like that. And you have in this town, you have these, I think there mentions there was a Baptist church and there was a Methodist church.
Yeah.
And apparently, despite being of two different creeds, everybody was kind of on the same page when the inciting incident, which we will get to. but as they were exploring the town, there was a Bible verse.
Yep.
Like they were looking for clues. So the sheriff from Clermont or
Clement, I think.
Clement.
Clement.
Clement. Okay. The man from Clement and the two. I think it was two deputies and a doctor. So there was like four of them going through. They go. House to house looking for stuff, and all they find is a dog that has been poisoned. Which I want you all to explain that one to me a little bit later.
Yeah.
And then go ahead.
I was just saying I have some words about that as well as what you're about to talk about with the Bible verse and the two churches in this town. So, but yeah, I'll let you go first. Sorry.
Okay, you have scrawled on a wall or a mirror in lipstick, I believe, it said Revelation 9.1, and that verse is, and I am going to read from the Big King James Version since that's pretty popular in this area. And the fifth angel sounded. I saw a star fall from heaven unto the earth, and to him was given the key of the bottomless pit. So nice, Revelation is a book where you talk about the end of days and the Armageddon and seven-headed serpent or maybe I'm getting my mythologies kind of messed up.
With the Leviathan and Behemoth. So
7 crowns. The smallest one was the one that led all.
So, and that's a nice little hint that they're throwing in there of the mindset, and then zoned out. All right. So, what do you all think of the Bible verse there?
I thought I actually really enjoyed it because I read this story like a couple of weeks ago, and then I reread it earlier today. And when I was taking my notes today, I was like, yeah, that is actually a really good revelation. Both like revelation in the sense that like it's the Bible quote, but also like a revelation of what's to come. After you read the story, you're like, oh yeah, that is actually a really nice hint. That doesn't reveal anything initially until you get to the 80s and and on, and then you like kind of it's like, oh, I should have seen that coming. Like that was actually a nice hint that somebody left behind.
Do you think it is it more than that? Is it insidious in its way? So I saw a star fall from heaven unto the earth, and to him was given the key to a bottomless pit. That that doesn't sound like a reward.
It does sound like somebody maybe somebody maybe it's the perspective of the people going down. Like they're going down seeking shelter, but there's like dissent in their midst of by doing this, they are basically like forsaking the rest of the world to a nuclear war, because that verse in itself almost prophesizes like what their fears, like projects their fears and like ultimate fate to a T. Because like again, like I saw a star fall from heaven, like that could be interpreted as like the missiles dropping down from the sky. And again, like the angel sounding like is like the maybe the apocalyptic air raid siren-y kind of thing going on. And then them condemning, like given the key to the bottomless pit, like, well, the pit is like, or the bottomless pit, it's like literally it is the tunnel that goes down to their potential salvation, but like in doing so they are forsaking the rest of the world, like, and not telling anybody this stuff. Like they're Does
it mention how the cave-in occurred, or what? Like, do you think that maybe the cave-in that actually traps? That's
sorry. Not to like steal your thunder. But
no, it's all good.
Because they say like I've got some words about the tunnel situation in the first place, but it says that like the geologists and like people that looked into that like basically figured it like in the hustle to get through those tight quarters. Like that's what caused the cave-in. But it makes you wonder if like they did that intentionally to protect themselves further. So and like we don't know any of like the story is kind of done in this like factual way, so like we don't get the perspectives of the folks of Edmonson So we like there's nothing left behind like to like give us clues as to like their perspective on the matter. We just kind of it's like out of context, outside opinion view of the whole situation. So
yeah, I have a everybody knows the crockpot story here. I don't know if the internet knows it, but you can find it. So I have a interesting perspective on the Bible and its interpretation. Adam, are you of a denomination? I've never asked this before.
No, that's no problem. Yeah, I was not the best practicing person, but I was raised Church of Christ.
Okay, so I think this is interesting if there is both a Methodist and a Baptist. From my experience, Baptist, as a Southern Baptist, which is like, the most extreme version on the scale you can go, that Bible verse can have infinite meanings. Because at a certain point, the book of Revelations is almost a choose-your-own-adventure in that denomination.
Yeah.
Because you read it, and it applies presently, pastly, futurely, metaphorically, and symbolically. So I think for the author's perspective, that was a great little hint as well. I think for an ideation for the players or for a possible GM who wants a basis for a story, it's also fantastic because it does create this, well, if you want to go with a supernatural perspective, we have, if the falling star is a heavenly thing, we now have aliens, we now have otherness showing up and being given control of these people.
Yeah.
Or, we have the threat and then they choose to use that as the threat is what unlocks the necessary personal drive to go into the cave. The key is not an actual literal thing. I think it's very interesting at least from my experience, because the Bible verse in this can play as anything. And then, depending on your denomination, as the reader, you get a very more interesting take on the situation.
Yeah.
I did think it was interesting. Also, it kind of left me a little confused while I was reading it the second time around, that this town has two churches, and both agreed to go into the Methodist church and go down into these tunnels. Like, the threat was either so profound for this town to do that. Like, I almost wonder, I had actually been like mulling, like, I wonder if it would have been more creepy if it had like when the police agents were going through the houses looking for like evidence of anybody, they had found forced entry into some of these homes to show like that maybe like but then when you put it together, it was the people that were going to the other church that were forced or that were like basically taken against their will down into the pit or down into the tunnel, or like maybe like I'm not sure if it would be creepier or not. Like, I think actually now that you propose that, like, where it's like they all just kind of went down like together, like regardless of their creed, or not. Is it creed? Is that actually the correct term for that? Or as a result of their denomination, or regardless of their denomination, they all agreed to go down into the tunnels. Whereas I wonder if it might have been creepier to have like the town like have that schism and like basically have a purge before they went down. But I don't know. Like, I think it is creepy. It is really creepy that they all just vanished or all just walked down there.
I do think having two denominations is actually very logical and actually works out for the better to make this feel real, because a single church town, even in the South, like, is not possible.
Okay, I wasn't sure the logistics of that. So
and like Methodists are almost center of the road from my experience of the denominations, and generally Methodists can get along with pretty much anybody, and Baptists can get along with pretty much anybody. The kind of rub is Baptists believe in the baptism way more and put more emphasis on that. Yeah. So like them having a healthy relationship with each other and having healthy religious debates on the nature of the Bible, of Christianity, and then having this situation happen, is completely understandable that at one point somebody might have gone like, this is bigger than both of us. Let's combine forces to get the hell out of here.
Yeah, it almost makes you wonder, because also makes you wonder, like, if this was like something that was the catalyst for this might have been mundane, in that the townsfolk saw like some kind of like chemtrail or something like that over their skies, or there was some kind of like it kind of reports in the FBI thing, there was an atmospheric anomaly that caused them to go down under the ground. It makes you wonder if like they did see something that night and they're like, oh, like they just all came together. It's like, we're fucked. Like, this is the end. Because there's got to be some kind of catalyst to that, like that made them do this all. Or
I think that's, again, it rolls into the isolation. So
yeah,
like everybody can get along together, creed wise. It's not unheard of, but like, Christians in general are supposed to live in this world and not of this world. So, I mean, you have this general, base reference point. Now, I as we were I was listening to y'all talk about this, I started even thinking like Lord of the Flies, because I think the real horror in this story is, if you were thinking of this like a Lord of the Flies situation, everybody's on the plane together. Now, you got these two different groups with two different belief sets that are trapped underground.
Yeah.
And stuff like that. I think that's when you're going to start seeing the conch shell and the pig and stuff like other crazy stuff like that. Like, the things that are scary are the things that are not shown, which really works with the narrative structure of this. I mean, I think we talked about this a moment before we started recording, but I love how this is written. This thing is written like you're watching a documentary. Like it bounces between not a very clear present to just like, it's almost like you get little side information. Like it had mentioned the sheriff, and then it says, well, the sheriff died of lung cancer in 1969. And then, so you get this background information, and then it goes back to his, like the sheriff talking about, or them talking about what the sheriff saw in town. And then it goes to like his declaration of this, the sheriff had fought in World War II and the Korean War, more violence. Mm-hmm. That's shown here, and then he's on his deathbed saying this is the scariest thing above, like that he's seen, and he's been into, great wars. I think the scary things are the things that we don't see. The scary things are the things that like happen in the cave, but the scary things are also the climate that apparently exists in this town that nobody really picked up on. I mean, there had to be a plan. Like things were packed. There wasn't a single thing of luggage. Food was taken in, ranked on its perishability. So like canned goods and stuff like that made it into the cave. Yeah. Milk and things like that was sour were left out. Like this was an organized plan.
Well, sorry.
No, I'm done.
Okay. I was just gonna say, even the basement underneath the church was unplanned, or not unplanned, but like it was they carved that into the bedrock, and then they found an entry into the cave systems below, and they built a sealed off door or hatch to get down into it. Like,
oh my God, they're a modern day Noah.
Yeah, it's it's almost, or like preppers, like almost, it's like kind of like a mix between like the Noah's Ark kind of thing and like the prepper ideology of like going down into a bunker and like waiting out the apocalypse.
Yeah,
or surviving the apocalypse that never happened.
Yeah,
but yeah, and also on the thing of their preparedness and stuff like that, like so. There's a part in the story where it wasn't just the people, but it was also all the dogs, except for one, which was found to be poisoned in the backyard of one of the properties. And like they'd given the dog, put some like some poison pills basically in like hamburger meat and fed the dog, and the dog, but like, why? Like, why would, like, I feel it's almost kind of, for me, it was almost like a morbid, like, situation that happened. Like, did a family miss the message that you could bring your dog down into the bunker? And they, like, when they get down to the tunnels and they see other people with their pets, they're like, oh, sorry, Bootsy. Uh,
What do you think the pets were brought down there for, though?
I mean, yeah, obviously. And that's okay. That's the other side that makes it even creepier. Is like they didn't want to eat Bootsy, so they thought that would be more dignified is to just like poison her above and leave her up there than to meet the fate of what the other dogs and animals were going to have. Like, yeah, like that's like in the apocalypse that like our pets are just going to become another source of food. When we get desperate enough. Sorry.
Did you ever play Silent Hill, the original?
I have not finished playing it, but I have it.
Okay. I'm digging back to the 90s and PlayStation, but I think this was a nice, I don't know if it's a like deliberate callback, but you have this animal, like, okay, let me go back to the beginning. In Silent Hill, there's a scene and there's nothing built around it. It's just something that is there that it was so disturbing that I remember it, 20 years later. But you make it to a part of a town where there is, like, I think a basketball goal, and like it's concrete. It's like, exterior kind of thing. But underneath the basketball goal in this, PlayStation era graphics is a severed head of a dog.
Oh,
no
Jesus.
explanation. No anything. And it's creepy. But then again, this is a Silent Hill type setting. It's isolated, it's cut off, everybody's gone, it's just missing the fog.
Yeah.
So like that was cool. And maybe this is an artistic kind of statement of these people's intentions or their heart or their outcome. Because, I mean, dogs are symbolically supposed to be man's best friend.
Yeah.
And you're poisoning your best friend. You're cutting yourself off from society and everyone as a whole and stuff like that. I think it's kind of, not to make too big of a pun, but it's kind of reflecting the dog-eat-dog mentality that kind of led up to this.
And it's going to follow it.
Yeah.
Because
literally,
yeah. Well, not just dog eat dog, like in the literal sense, but I mean, like dog eat dog in that, like, yeah, these people's future, like their fate, in the present is very much that. Like they basically they've given up a good portion of their humanity, it seems, in the process of like doing this act.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Here's something goes with that. So one of the people. Like, there was only one person they found that had been to Edmonton prior,
Edmonson.
Edmonton. Damn it! I keep going to Canada. I'm skipping ahead. Okay, so there was one person who previously was at the town that the FBI was able to track down, and it was a vacuum cleaner salesman. And this was not a normal day for the vacuum cleaner salesman, because when he went through Edmonson, he, go door to door trying to sell these like housewives vacuum cleaners, and nobody in the town was interested in it. And this struck him as odd because, like, I mean, this is this man's job. He does it every day, but usually in the course of a day when he canvasses an area, he makes sales, and he made none. And this was prior to the fact that everybody had just, went underground and stuff like that. And if we are to believe that what led up to this mass exodus was a weird atmospheric condition that the townsfolk took as either the beginning of a nuclear war or a
sign from God,
then I think this maybe even points more to the fact that these people were maybe planning this beforehand. We're not going to need that where we're going.
Yeah.
Like, this was how the fear in this town had just kept ramping up more and more. Like, think about it. Like, I can't get out of my house packing. If you told me to grab everything I would need as the bomb is falling and we're waiting for, nuclear hell to break loose on Earth, like, I'm not going to be able to grab everything. But these people had luggage packed. They had their food, like everything that would last was taken with them.
I think that point might be a little our modern era does not have that. But if you got to remember, these guys lived through the 50s, so like duck and cover and bomb shelters would have been inundated with them. They would have been very prepared. So I think saying we couldn't leave at the drop of that is very true. I think giving them a little more leeway. It doesn't mean it's not crazy and like they were well prepared, but they would be a little bit more on the know.
Yeah, because I mean, it's like you said, like they were basically like they were definitely planning this probably prior to that single night. Like it probably didn't all just happen in that one night. Something had happened or something had brought this on, or like maybe they were just completely utterly prepared for it.
They're divorced from like I think it's another divorce thing. Like they're divorced from capitalism, and I mean if you think about after World War II and so forth, I mean America's economy and like we're out of the Great Depression, things are on the rise, everything's good, everybody's going to have a car, house, white picket fence and stuff like that, and these people like have already shed that part of their identity prior to like the steps that they took.
Yeah.
I may be reaching a tad bit on that, but
no, it's.
I think that's an interesting. I mean, what we're discussing is the fact that there's all these possibilities with this thing, and that's one of the. I mean, that's why this makes this such a good, unique piece because it is divorced from the spooky jump scare or whatever. It's just this blank slate of like, hey, here's what happened. Here's some weird shit that's happening around it. Figure it out yourself. And like, the more we dig into this and we talk about what we see and what we feel, the more it kind of shows why this is such an interesting piece. Because it does draw on all the different aspects that we take for granted in culture or that we think about that we never have a voice for. And it does this great job of encapsulating it in this very simple piece.
Another thing I want to talk about for the story is so near the end, like it starts talking about like the missing peoples around Edmonton and like in Mammoth Caves National Park. They bring up the strange noises that people apparently hear in the woods and caves since the 70s, as well as sightings of a tall humanoid-like creature called the Black Demon, according to unrelated local lore. I was kind of thrown off by that, because like at this point in the story was definitely leaning into, okay, this is just going to be like, again, subhuman, like Martens style underground dwelling humanoids, or like again like a few generations of people that have lived underground and are now eating people or worse. But then with like they just kind of mention this tall humanoid creature. Is this an actual like cryptid in Kentucky, Adam, as far as you can tell?
And people around here swear they've seen Bigfoot. Like,
so it's like, yeah.
So
devil monkeys.
I can't think of anything in particular that would be referring to. Yeah,
and like the only thing that comes to mind in terms of like outside of like reality and more into like game fodder and like using the story for something like that, I could see it like being like a Slender Man connection to a degree.
Yeah.
Just because like the Grobermensch, like the tall man on the trees in Germany, and like his connection like that, and like again he's got like again black suit, pale face, kind of just like one like lives in forests, known for disappearances. But if you wanted to take it like this, like if you wanted to ever use this is kind of deviating away from like creepypasta stuff, but like if you wanted to use this for like a DG game or even a Fall of Delta Green game, like scenario, like for inspiration, you could maybe even incorporate like the Martens style cult to Nyarlathotep.
Yeah,
because he's the black man in the woods.
Yeah, nice connection.
Yeah, I also think that it makes a sort of sense, because as they were describing, like by the end of it, this is probably the second or third generation that's lived in caves. Like, if you're the second or third generation, what is America's folklore like? Who is the biggest, toughest dude in American folklore? Paul Bunyan, who's a literal giant. So what do you send out to a world that's been destroyed?
The biggest, toughest guy you got.
Yeah.
Oh God.
That's what the black, that's what the giant is, and the demon is probably. That's just what it reads for me. It's just like the biggest, swollest dude in the cave.
Yeah, the biggest,
probably miserable because he doesn't quite fit, but like out here is his playground.
Yeah, basically, you send out the big bad Morlock to go get the alloy, to reference Time Machine, because again, it fits. Like it's like horror genre is definitely like just swimming around this story, with just like things come to mind from the story, like just reading the story.
Yeah, well, Time Machine too. Like I'm kind of thinking back to of course. I'll be honest with you. I've never read H.G. Wells. I think he's the one that wrote that. I've never read that, but I watched the movie. It had Guy Pearce in it. So, but that's the closest reference I got on that one. But I'm thinking about how the two different peoples developed. So the people who went underground became predatorial, and the people that stayed above ground. There was like, at least in the film, it depicted it probably much more than H.G. Wells' novel itself. But there was I think there was really only one race at that point, and there were, everybody had, kind of intermingled and stuff like that. I would think that it would be very disturbing for someone who's been underground, their culture's been underground since the 60s, to pop back up 60 years later and see how their world has been turned on its nose.
Yeah, because... Yeah, to just kind of give some context to like the Morlocks and the Time Machine in the book and stuff like that, I believe the Morlocks are the humans that tried to survive the wars and whatever like the future was by going underground, and then they left the Eloi, which are the other humans, which is like a melting pot of humanity, up on the surface to be their lambs. The Morlocks were known to have a caste system. I believe actually the Eloi were part of that caste system, as basically being the food source for the Morlocks. And they had like special breeds or special like types of Morlocks to do certain things.
Yeah.
Because I've read it and studied it. It's a little bit different. The Morlocks represent the working class because they run the machinery down at the bottom.
You're right.
Essentially have been specially bred to live underground, while the Eloi up top are the upper crust that don't have to do anything, and their lives are provided for by the Morlock.
It's literally eating the rich.
And which is why at the end they come to the surface and they kill them, just as a representation. They've read into that as like, Marxist literature at that point, because look, the working class is uprising to destroy these lazy, elfin, beautiful people that don't actually do anything for anybody. And also as like at the beginning, it started as a symbolic relationship and then slowly became exploitative.
Yeah.
I also kind of think it would be interesting for us to talk about the two items that were found when, it has to be some symbolic reference.
The reading glasses and the shoe without the heel.
Yeah.
What you have as like? Because I'm thinking of it. It's like, I mean, if you're going into like symbolism for it, like they left their the reading glasses. They like basically, I guess like for like kind of like I'm trying to think of the word for it. I've lost it. So what do you have for that, like for interpretation?
All right, let me preface it so it'd make it easier for you. Okay, so this story is so concise and compartmentalized that like I keep looking as I go through this for things to latch onto to try to draw a deeper meaning to it. And one of the things that stick out for me is that when they return, and I believe it was during the 90s, but when it is the whereabouts of where the townsfolk went was later on discovered by people that were just exploring the decrepit environment. They found in the basement of the Methodist church, or near the cave-in, a pair of glasses and I think one high heel shoe. So it was like a woman's glasses and a woman's shoe.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of reaching around trying to figure this out. Of course, like glasses, obviously, you have the functional like sight, and we're not going to need that where we're going thing. But I also, have always kind of associated glasses with, or vision in general with like intelligence and sight or foresight. And I wonder if like the destruction or leaving those glasses behind is kind of a reference of how this was maybe a poorly planned thing, or they're not thinking, or they're going to be, I guess, in a way, devolving intellectually as they go forth. There's no foresight or anything like that.
Yeah, that's similar to what I was thinking for the glasses. Like, was maybe it might not even be like a symbolic thing that the people did in the story intentionally. It might have been just something that the author put in as a symbol, like a little bit of symbolism of like the people forsaking civilization or like humanity and intelligence by going deeper underground.
You could also read it as, because if you look into it, it says that these are made around the late 50s, early 60s. It is kind of a shedding. You can read it as a shedding of humanity for religious reasons or symbolic reasons. But you could also, where's my notes? Second? Okay, 1962. It could also imply that this was not the first time this has happened. I think a more interesting thing for that sentence would have been if it was from the mid 1950s to the late 1960s, because then it spreads it out just enough to give an indication that this might not have been a choice. This might have been an actual like stealing. Because that was what I saw when I read it. Clearly didn't read closely enough for that, but like the idea of like people coming and getting taken and dropping their glasses, or like breaking the heel of a shoe. If these were organized as it seems we were talking about, like breaking your heel right at the entrance does not imply orderly entrance, especially if you're having to crawl like this guy had to do to get to the cave. Like, this seems like everything was in a rush, and rushing as soon as you stand up from a belly crawl. It sounds more like this woman was dragged.
Yeah, it could
or forced into the situation.
Yeah, like have this basically like either again like maybe this wasn't all just like, okay, we've all agreed to do this, let's go down. This could have been either somebody who was dragged down there at the time, or like over the last few decades since this happened, this is one of the entry points that the Morlocks or the Edmonson folk have used before there was a cave. Maybe the cave-in happened like later on, like before, after all, like after the years after the exodus down into the pit. Something actually, an incongruity I found with the details of the story with the tunnel itself, outside of like just racking up the tension of claustrophobia, with like for the narrative. How did 236 people of varying sizes and carrying luggage make it through that narrow passage? Like, am I not like thinking of something there where like it just feels like that? I feel like that tunnel maybe should have been a little bit larger, or that there should have been some kind of something brought up in the story as to a hint that there was a shift. That like in the earth that caused it to like be like the narrower passage, because I mean there is the rock slide, but was it always that like claustrophobic and like small of a passage to have people like have to be crawling on their on their stomachs basically to get into there? I don't know. It just feels weird that like 236 people vanished overnight by with their luggage and non-perishables into a tunnel that small.
and that's what Adam said. Like, if this didn't have the biblical tie, yes, like where there should be drag marks, there should be scrapes, there should be something left. But with the biblical tie, it's now just like these people are gone, and that makes that gives credence to both the idea that this is a biblical thing, the supernatural element, because religion and supernatural are tied together. Yeah. This makes a lot of these incongruous points point to, okay, maybe they were right, or maybe something led them, or something.
Yeah, maybe somebody parted the tunnel wider so that they could walk through and then closed it up again.
The symbolism can be found in Matthew 7, verses 13 and 14. Enter by the narrow gate, for wide is the gate and broad is the way that leads to destruction, and there are many who go in by it, because narrow is the gate and difficult is the way which leads to life, and there are few who find it.
Damn. Now imagine if Stevens had found that carved on the ceiling or something of the tunnel as he was going down there, like seen Michael, like the police saw Revelations 9:1. What if somebody had seen that Michael's entry like carved somewhere on in the tunnel? Like that would have been like a nice addition to the story for that.
It may be too on the nose too. It would have been nice if they went that route, if they had actually included something like where you could see where people had squeezed into a narrow passageway, and it, like there's like bits of clothes that had been torn off, and it's like scrapes of blood and stuff like that. I mean, that's kind of horrific. Just to imagine just cramming people through that and stuff like.
Yeah, because I mean, there was an investigation in the 80s after the two campers reported it. Like they did go. People did presumably other people did go down into that hatch, or at least like survey it to make sure to see like what could be done on the investigation side. So like we could have had a little bit more information to kind of add on to that, just to kind of give a little bit more on what's going on, but. We didn't.
Yeah. But we're about to the end of the story here. I'm trying to think if there's anything else.
Checking my notes. From a grammar thing, I mean, we usually do a grammar inquisition on the show, but there really wasn't a whole lot on the front end of the story. It was mostly the back end. It kind of felt like maybe the writer was getting a little sloppy. Like I have a handful of basically just like minor typos and issues that were in the story that I found, like just like words that weren't used that where they should have been, or like they were missing a word.
Weird capitalization, which was just typos, like Mammoth Cave. It's capitalized, proper noun, but then it would put system.
Yeah. There's also a couple of redundancies, like I'll just mention this one. The FBI sent an investigative team to investigate the disappearance of Edmonson. It's like it just felt like that was maybe you didn't need to have an investigative team to investigate. Like we know if they're just a team to investigate.
Yeah.
And then Edmonson soon became a little-known historical footnote in Kentucky's history. Just again, a very nitpicky. Like there is a little bit of redundancy in some of the wording. But outside of that, and outside of a few like anomalous typos, the story is written and presented pretty well. So. Oh
yeah, like it's as professional as a creepypasta can be, in my opinion.
Yeah, we've as my 270 something episodes have shown, there is definitely. This is definitely not the worst perpetrator of grammar inquisition.
I would even be willing to wager that, I don't know, the way things feel, I almost want to think that the author may be from the region or have a familiarity with the region.
Yeah.
That's
or
awesome.
at least has gone there, or gone to Mammoth Caves, and I was like, this is really cool.
Yeah.
I should write a creepy story about it.
What if anyone's done that before?
It's like, I mean, it again kind of boils down to like, if that is the case, well, it follows that thing where like write what you know, like write where you've been, because like that's the best way, like to like help build and like build a strong familiarity to something.
And abandoned places in Kentucky is fairly common. Like, I know that, like, in our personal conversations we've had just kicking around RPG scenarios, in brief little text messages, I know of a town that's actually underwater in Kentucky called Harvard, and it was an old logging community that when, and like I think it's even around the 60s or something like that, they dammed off an area and just let it flood, and then it just became a large lake in the Danube National Forest kind of area. And there is, if you want a little extra creepy fodder, pasta fodder here for you, like I have really got into this recently because I purchased a drone because I'm a 39-year-old child that wants to play with a toy flying in the air. But like I was looking through just drone footage in Kentucky, and I have found like old amusement parks that were open and
Oh my God.
and it were shut down, and then nature starts reclaiming them and stuff like that. And like it's great, like creepy fodder kind of thing like that, which actually I just had an epiphany. This was nature reclaiming humanity.
Yeah. Like basically
goes back
man
to our idea of romanticism.
Yeah.
Mhm. Like the people went down into the ground, into Mother Earth, and shed their humanity and became beasts again to a degree.
And the woman doesn't need, like, maybe this is what I thought too. And I know that we just went grammar, and I was just like, nope,
Yeah,
back
sorry.
on this road. No, it's not.
Yeah.
But it occurs to me that, when we were talking about the glasses and the shoe that were a woman's, like, and then they're taking people from the surface for genetic breeding stock and stuff like that. It almost like you're returning to this caveman, club the girl and drag her back to your cave kind of shit, which it turns pretty damn literal in this particular story, which, I mean, you see that in other depictions of degenerate societies, like The Hills Have Eyes, for example.
Yeah.
And
Hills of
like
Eyes. I think even The Descent, to
Mm-hmm.
a degree. I guess even not the Chainsaw Massacre, but like
They were
again,
food.
yeah, they were just food in that one. I'm trying to think. I don't think Wrong Turn. I don't think they had the hillbilly or the mutated hillfolk and stuff like that. But it was I think it was again more just food source.
No,
or just,
you're on the right path though with
Okay.
Wrong Turn, which is set in West Virginia.
Oh, perfect.
But no, it's cool. I just remember sitting in the movie theater when that came out, watching Wrong Turn, and there was this African American guy sitting next to me. I didn't know him, but he, like, in the middle of these crazy hillbilly stuff, he goes, "That's why my black ass never goes to West Virginia." But like in Wrong Turn, I think they actually find the mother of the family, and she has been like chained to a bed and just turned into a broodmare.
Yeah, and like that happens actually even in video game like fiction, Dragon Age. The Darkspawn. Their whole system is basically like not Morlocks, although kind of. Again, like the whole like underground dwellers, they feast on human flesh or like flesh of
surface
dwellers, and their females are just giant breeding factories. Like
so
horrific.
There is a movie that came out a couple of years ago that has this same exact thing that I just saw on Red Letter Media. I don't know if you guys follow that. It's called Bone Tomahawk. It is actually kind of very similar to this idea. It's made in like 2012 or 14.
Yeah.
It's a Western, but it deals with, these are actually like cannibalistic savages that are taking people and us going to it. And I would highly recommend watching that review of theirs because it shows a lot of care that was put into that to show like the degradation of the world to get there. And, and they don't show a lot of clips of it. It's it's crazy.
They're a little bit tasteful in their graphic.
It's
no?
the review.
Oh, okay,
Does not show it because they would be demonetized very quickly. It's very graphic and stuff, but yeah, brood females as broodmares does play a point that's a part towards the end. It's very. It would be another one that would be good if you were interested in making the narratives that we're talking about here. It's a very good way of showing how this can be done in like the Western era versus this one, which is the contemporary era.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want to watch Kurt Russell be his Kurt Russell, that's a good damn movie for it.
Yeah,
Oh, really?
it is. Kurt Russell's the main character.
Oh my god. Okay, yeah, I've definitely seen this movie then.
Who stepped into my breakfast?
But I think at some point it would be really interesting. So here's your homework assignment, Crazon.
Yeah.
Like, I would like to see how many different types of horror we find, like that have people going underground and stuff like that.
Can probably just do a quick search of just like underground dweller subgenre horror and probably find an insurmountable amount of them. Yeah.
That's the only place we have left to go. We've expanded as far as we can. The only unknowns are in the ocean, and
there's also a very large supply of genre movies and fiction in there too, with like Cold Skin being a fairly newer like adaptation of that kind of like I get Deep Ones and like I don't know if you've seen those like fake videos on YouTube of like real life mermaids captured on like subnautical cameras.
There was like a whole actual Discovery Channel thing that was produced years ago where it actually showed like what if, and then it was just like man returns to the sea, and then like it was like a tribe or something like that slowly like de-evolved. I wouldn't say de-evolved, but evolved to this.
Adapted.
Yeah, adapted to this. But yeah, so that's your wild tangent research assignment there. I just wonder.
Right. Yeah, I guess do we have any like I guess we kind of talked a little bit on it, reached a little bit on it, but like do we have kind of because like while like our show Al Dente is creepypasta kind of story writing focused, but you guys like you got RPX and Travis, you're like constantly making game scenarios and game designing, and I myself also do a lot of game designing, like for scenarios for horror stuff. Do we have any like? I feel like you could just take this whole story, just don't even have to really like do much prep work, and just use this story to run like a Fall of Delta Green game, or like just a game where you're playing the cops from Clement going into town and like just maybe taking a little bit further and just them finding the hatch.
Well, you have isolation, and that's a key to horror. But you also have like you're away from technology, and that's what I really like here. So if I were going to play with a similar scenario, and coming from where I come from and my interest in Appalachia and the plight of people here, I think it would be an interesting thing to kind of take something like this, maybe move it a little more eastern, and then like one of the big controversies that has developed in the past 50 years here has been like strip mining, which is basically just you're raping the land and taking everything from it, and then it's worthless. And ironically enough, man, the only thing that you can do with that land is put a prison on it. That's what we're finding here in Eastern Kentucky. Like there's been like old sites that they're proposing to turn it in, like turn it into prisons, which that's not even talking about the radioactive element that's actually involved in coal. Like being exposed to this stuff, like causes cancer and runoff and things like that. So here's my one scenario that can be twisted two different ways for you here. Both of them involve, I would like to either use miners or use people doing like a geological survey, or maybe even prison guards. Because I think it would be really nice to have people like set up a scenario where you're like your surveyors and GIS people and so forth going to an old strip mined area to repurpose it for something, and then there's a passage, or you're stuck there and a member of your party disappears in the night and gets drug. You see them being drugged underground, and then the entire premise of it is going after them and stuff like that, and you go down there and start encountering the members of Edmonson, and that would be really cool. Like you're gonna find your investigators would be very limited in what they have. Cell phones are not a thing, definitely underground. And you're going to be going through finding the old relics of the 60s, maybe temples that have been made underground. You could even, as you scale this thing to the big crescendo of the scenario, you start, seeing how things have de-evolved. Like you start seeing them shed other parts of their humanity to the point that you may even encounter I kind of and I kind of hate body horror, and I kind of include things that disturb me and stuff like that. I would like to see you start encountering things that these humans don't need, body parts that they don't need, and stuff like that.
People that have shattered their legs so that they can sit in the cave and swiggle around in there.
Yeah. Oh God!
Things like that. That would be creepy.
Yeah,
You're welcome.
I just pictured all I could think of is this really beefy armed human or monster human dude without his legs, just stubs, and just coming at you. Oh God, it's almost like the Amante from the Delta Green game, Lover in the Ice.
Yeah,
oh no. Thank you, Travis.
That's what I'm here for.
If you want to reskin this, and I add this last bit in here before I turn the table over to Travis. I would like to even say that if you want to take a different kind of approach, use the prison that I talked about.
Yeah.
So it could be anything from a prison break a la Alcatraz, like they took a spoon and dug for 20 years. Or actually, would that be not Casco Amontillado?
That's
Victor Hugo, help me.
I think that was Shawshank Redemption. Was it?
I was actually thinking more of the fuck. Dude, it was like Edmond Dantes.
The Great Escape? Sorry.
No, this is more Napoleonic. I can't think of it.
Count of Monte Cristo.
Count of Monte Cristo kind of deal like that, where somebody has done this, or maybe these things have broke into the prison and stuff like that. And or your people is on a jailbreak and you've dug your hole. So anyway, I would like to either involve prison guards or prisoners or a mix therein that somehow find themselves not only encountering these people, but the only way out is to go in, if that makes sense.
So I've got a nasty little twist to this, to your idea there.
Okay.
So yeah, again, strip mined a land, they put a prison on it. You're in your prisoners, or even the guards, the low-ranking prison guards that monitor everybody. Your prison has a fairly high prisoner mortality rate.
Oh God, I see where you're going.
And the big revelation is that the friggin' head wardens are in on it. They've come to an agreement with the guys down below, and are basically allowing them to pick off the undesirables in the prison. There's
a comic book by Ben Templesmith, and it was also, by the way, Google this, YouTube it, because this is a nice little fan film. But it's the comic book and the YouTube film is called Welcome to Hoxford, and it's what if, the hero, the anti-hero, is this horrific serial killer and stuff like that, but he's been sent to this prison, and the prison's actually ran by werewolves, and then once ever so often they open the cells and it becomes a great hunt.
Oh my God. Yes. That's basically, very similar kind of situation.
I like your idea better than mine. Awesome. Travis, what do you have there?
So I have, as per usual, my enjoyment of designing games with multiple systems. I will say, first and foremost, if you want to deal with a prison plot, I would highly suggest The Suffering. 1 and 2, one specifically, as a way to get a feel of what it's like to be in a prison that's become overrun by supernatural entities.
Yeah.
Definitely at least watch a playthrough of the first one. The second one, maybe. Also, I talked about this on Twitter. What you're describing is very similar to the French television show Zone Blanche on Netflix, also called The Black Spot. And this is what I would suggest as mine is Zone Blanche is essentially the entire series is focused around the police department of this small town that has 6 times the murder rate of the rest of the country, and it's a dead zone, which is why it's called Black Spot. Literally, Zone Blanche means white zone, which is the French version of a dead zone. And you're playing as individuals in this town that used to have a strip mine, and a logging company that has kind of fallen through, and it's dealing with these events that seem supernatural that have possibly mundane solutions, but supernatural keeps its head in. And if I was to run a game, I would 100% watch this series and use this as an inspiration and try and do it through different systems. I think different systems can highlight different emotions, and mechanics can highlight different ideas that you're trying to get across. So if for one instance you're trying to, one episode, I think they get lost in a cave, quite literally, and they get exposed to hallucinogenics in the cave and things go sideways. That's very easily done in Fear itself or some type of thing like that. At another time, they're trying to figure out who killed a person in the woods. They swear to God they see a horned individual in the woods. That one's a very simple, Delta Green non-initiative characters trying to deal with this possible supernatural result.
I'd even suggest maybe A Dirty World for that one.
Dirty World work as well, and then there's some that deal with the internal issues of the town, vaguely supernatural attachments. That's just called Cthulhu, and then it gets super sideways at the end of the season where an eco-terrorist starts showing up. You can fold that into actually being a shove cult or something, and this series itself does a great job of playing with what we've talked about here. And my suggestion would be, if we do set this in Eastern Kentucky, is to also watch Justified. It might not be a good representation of Kentucky, but it is based in Harlow County. It does give a good viewpoint of the world there and the social dynamics, and you can use that as another means of building up a scenario where you deal with the townspeople, the weird events that might be coming from these underground entities, and then as they slowly merge, what happens with the society as a whole when underground and above ground meet, and at certain points maybe both of them have a not the correct answer, but a solution for the outer troubles coming to the county location that you're in.
Nice.
I like it.
Mm-hmm.
How about yourself? What kind of ideas do you have?
Well, again, I brought up earlier, but I guess I can reiterate. Honestly, again, reading the story, I was just kind of I could just take this story and just put you in Fall of Delta Green, and just maybe take it a step further. Maybe you're in the 70s, because the case lasted to 67, right? The FBI case.
Yeah.
And then even then there were instances after that between that and the present day. So you could have this as basically just use this as your notes, highlight details and information in the story, and just have this be as written, a scenario fodder.
Yeah, that was one of the ones I was avoiding saying, because I hate saying very simple, but you have three scenarios right here and a fourth.
Yeah, I mean, it's
here's your fucking
go to borrow off of. I feel like mine's is the laziest options. It's really just what it feels like. After build a strip line and pull this idea, and then pull it from this idea from this movie or this show, and then mine's just take the story, just use that. But to take from another good scenario from the RPPR podcast, Preemptive Revenge, and do a story where you start in Little Fears.
Oh, you're speaking my language.
And you lose your parents. And then the next scenario, you're 10, 20 years down the road, and what have you become as a result of your Little Fears encounter?
Little Fears does not get enough love.
It really doesn't. Yeah, especially with all the new. Yeah, I just as a quick tangent, I see a bunch of new kind of similar Little Fears scenario or setting or systems coming in, kids on bikes and again Tales from the Loop and Tales from Things from the Flood, and so and all I can think of is Little Fears did it first, guys. Little Fears is still pretty cool, guys.
Listen,
and
you
like,
feel my pain because Little
Yeah.
Fears is my favorite go-to system, and I have
yeah,
probably years worth of games I could run.
yeah. But yeah, I think that it would be interesting to like either do like a couple of period pieces where you're the authority figures investigating the town's disappearance, like the town's like whole problem, like right at the get go, and then like maybe the next scenario is like 10 years later, you just can't get over what you investigated in the first scenario, and so you've become obsessed with it, like Rustin Cole from True Detective season 1, and you're the guy look out in the woods looking for the cave systems and looking for the black demon in the woods, or like the disappearing people, like because the county apparently has the highest, it's like got the Kentucky Triangle like status of being like a place where people just go missing and like they're never seen again, kind of thing. Or go the route of like, yeah, again, preemptive revenge, where you start the scenario as in a Little Fears game where you're a bunch of kids camping with your family and your parents get taken, and like you have to survive the woods, and like maybe the things try to come after you too. And then a sequel scenario to that would be in Delta Green or Fear Itself. Probably Fear Itself I'd go with.
Yeah.
Just because it doesn't have, you may not necessarily be an authority figure, or even like a very like well-equipped figure. You'd be like, again, like Dennis Miller is in the story. He's just a pawn shop owner who has who set up a historical society for this little town, or for this like for this ghost town, in his pursuit and obsession to fix his parents' reputation and like prove their love to him and stuff like that. Yeah, I think that would be like an interesting take for this, for a game scenario, is just basically use the material already provided, highlight the details that you want to use, and then just run this and see where like the players go with it.
Yeah, and depending on the situation, folded mechanics, like Little Fears. Your parents did get killed by bears, but your fear has turned the latent background radiation of people thinking there's people in the underground actually real, and it's to the point that your craziness has infected the area, and now you're having to deal with literally a childhood nightmare that you can't deal with because you've lost belief, but you have to find another way of dealing.
Parents are killed by the bear, then you mutate the bear with your belief, with your fears, into the black demon.
Yeah, stuff like that.
Like, yeah.
The idea of Little Fears, if you draw inspiration from the original, which is
source
absolutely
material,
well, the original system is absolutely brutal, and you won't win sometimes, or it'll be a pyrrhic victory, and bring it to the new one and use that as like, sometimes you won't win, maybe you'll survive, but what happens afterwards when literally this, chaotic, etheric material of belief, it still is out there, it's still affecting the world, you lost connection to it.
Yeah. And it actually, again, plays on the idea of isolation, because like, what's scarier in terms of an isolated, like the fear of isolation, than when you're a child stuck in the middle of the woods?
Yep.
Like, yeah, it's that. Oh, that would definitely work.
So my last thing I want to add on this, and it occurred to me as you all were speaking. There was a move in the early 2000s to actually install servers, and caves are cold, but they maintain a temperature.
Yeah.
So I know nearby, where within 30 minutes of where I live, they were actually looking about taking a couple of caves and drilling into them and making like big server farms in there, because underground everything is like 60 degrees pretty much year round and stuff like that. So if you have things that generate a lot of heat and things like that there was a big move to actually take, there's in Kentucky, it's called Mushroom Mines, MINES, if you want to Google that sometimes, but you could actually have a whole scenario be set up with, be based around setting that up, or your people who are, monitoring and working the mines, and something goes wrong. And then you go there, and then the mines, there's a passage that's opened up, and it leads to the underground folk. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that starts to bring in the from the media perspective of like media theory and narrative storytelling and stuff, like by having technology in this mind now, you're bringing in the fold of like technology encroaching on nature, and like these things represent a human regression to nature, and the outside world, which is so almost cyborg level of reliant on technology, is encroaching, and now you have the battle between the technology and God, I forget what the word is. It's in red markets. It's just all no technology.
Yeah, you're basically, if God damn it. You know how like global warming and stuff like that's a huge concern for us now growing, like living in the world that we live in right now. Like it's not like out of the question to make the environment, like, even though it sustains you, it's also threatening you. Kind of
it rebels against us because we're ruining it.
Yeah, this is man encroaching where he should not, and
and actually, with the cold storage for the servers, or the cold server rooms, basically like using the underground, it also kind of plays on that with like human arrogance to think that like we know what's down there, and then like you guys, oh yeah, we've surveyed this once like a couple of times. It's a perfect location for the servers. You get down there like with the initial team to set it up, and then you find out that, oh, what's that tunnel wasn't there before. Cannibal men, cannibal dwellers. It's just like, I guess you could also like take this like kind of how the necrophage ghoul system is for like Delta Green again. Like the necrophage is what how they term ghouls in Delta Green, and they were a people that lived underground and adapted to underground living and eating the dead. And they fled deeper underground after the advent of like European settlement into North America. So again, just have like another instance where like you're building up that cold server facility in these unused mines, and then you accidentally breach through to the Edmonson clan after somebody hears some singing just beyond a wall, like beyond a cave wall, and they decide to like, what the hell's that music? And then they like crack it open, like they open up like a thin layer or a thin like a thin wall, and just go right into basically the Edmondson's like carnal layer.
Yeah. What was the Travis? You'll know this. What was the name of the Native American people that H.P. Lovecraft turned into monsters when he made them go underground?
Oh no!
Which one? What?
All right, so Delta. I know there was a Delta Green scenario, and this is probably a pretty big aside, but there was a Delta Green scenario that was in the Handler's Guide and stuff like that. Where
the Kenyani.
Kenyani, like, I mean,
oh god, the Kenyani.
That was the one I was actually about to say.
Yeah, the ones, the giant, the pale giants with the native tribes forced underground after warring with them, and they went down into the blue recess, like basically the blue hollow earth of Kinyan. That's all based off like I think the Serpent Mounds, or it's just called the Mound. I think is what Lovecraft wrote. He ghost wrote for another author.
Yeah, it's clearly inspired by the Native American burial mounds here in the because Lovecraft was great about appropriating things and not understanding things enough to scare them.
And the mounds are actually in Ohio and Missouri and so forth in that area, so it's close enough to Kentucky that you could actually even make a connection between the two. Yeah.
So like I guess. Oh yeah. So maybe that. Yeah. You could have it that the Kenyani were again to tie it into the Edmondson thing. You could have it that the Kenyani were. There was one of them that came up and was like the angel that sounded the song.
Yeah.
And like like, yeah, we need, come down into, come down into our home, like otherwise you'll to escape nuclear, this silly nuclear missile crisis. We're in need of some tests. I mean, you'll be saved.
So it's a walrus and oysters kind of setup.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, you could also very simply just to pull a Lovecraftian entity that does not get enough love. Like, it talks about a star falling to Earth. It's just a Cthulhu.
Yeah, it's just a fire.
It's a
fire
Cthulhu,
vampire or star vampire.
Fire vampire.
Yes,
and then, it freezes in the Delta Green source material, and then having them lead these individuals underground for whatever.
Awesome.
Because again, actually, that would, and like they could easily. Again, like make it that again, yeah, like you said, like it came down from the sky, and it wasn't it would probably be perceived as an angel, because angels are generally fireballs with wings. Yeah, fireballs with wings and like eyes everywhere, or depending on your interpretation of, or depending on the different Enochian texts and such.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's, I guess what we've come to is that like this story is rife with fodder. Like, and like it, like you can be close on the nose, or like borrow from other inspirations and use it for the story, for the same kind of premise and background of the story for it.
Yeah, it's what good fiction should do. It should tell its own story while allowing for you to get inspiration to make your own.
Yeah,
in some form or the other.
All right. I think that's probably, unless anybody else has anything else to add for Edmonson. Nope. I think that is going to we're going to call that one then.
Yep. Thanks again for having me. I've enjoyed being able to return and discuss the story, and look forward to seeing what horrors you guys are going to unleash on your own local geographical areas.
Yep. We'll have to figure out when we can do those, but yes.
And on my end, I always love coming back, and internet me to spook you. I'm a mercenary. Call me up. I'll try and fit you into my schedule.
Excellent.
It's very open. Please call me.
Also with that, I guess, Adam, Travis, do you want to promote anything before I do the sign off?
I kind of take care of a little podcast called the Role Playing Exchange. You can find us at www.roleplayingexchange.com. We have a Twitter page, and by we, I mean my co-host did have control of it, but I control his email address, so I hacked his password, and now it's mine. But that's neither here nor there. But you can get us at RPEXGHANGE, and we're also on Facebook at facebook.com/the Role Playing Exchange, and basically we do 2 actual plays a month, and we will also do a talkie episode, as I like to call them, with it's either like an interview with a game designer, or we discuss certain topics in the role playing field. And so if you enjoy these smooth Southern dulcet tones, please go over and check us out.
On my end, you can find me at Twitter at Juju_Munter, Munster. That's where I'll be most of the time. You can technically send me an email. Crazon will be my guardian. But
yes.
Contact me on Twitter if you're very interested in that. I routinely post updates on life and do media dissections. So, like last weekend, I delved into Stalker and the idea of zones of isolation and changed and affected and science fiction mediums. I think this weekend I went to sleep because I haven't actually slept a lot. But I also do some work with Delta Green and Arc Dream. If I ever have a conference I can go to, or con, I run games for them, including the Storage Wars campaign, which uses the 4 stages of language acquisitions to explore the themes of information dissection and distribution inside of our culture. And I also game related to trying to bring back, as I mentioned earlier, some of the Lovecraftian elements and entities that have fallen to the wayside due to misuse, odd appropriations, and the like. Adam is actually on the first half of a 3-part campaign, which Crazon has played. The first one is not, and I have not run.
Duh.
Y'all, anybody that listens to Role Playing Exchange will probably eventually get to hear the man cometh.
Oh, definitely.
Yuri. Poor Yuri. But yeah, awesome. Okay, then as always, you can contact me at Review Cultist on Twitter. You can also send us emails at aldenterigamortis@gmail.com. That's aldenterigamortis@gmail.com, where you can also leave us suggestions for creepypastas. And as Travis said, you can, if you have questions for him, you can send them through me, and I will forward them to him.
I have a website as well. I forgot I actually had this.
Okay.
My personal portfolio website has a contact. I don't know if it works. But yeah, you can go to my portfolio website, which is tgasq.me, and go to the contact page. It has just a generic form. I don't mind the web page. I need to update it now that I have the excuse to update.
The excuse to do it?
The excuse to do it.
Yeah. I'll leave all this information in the comment, not in the comment, in the description of this episode. I'm going to have to basically re-listen to this episode and just like write down all the things that we comment on, like all the things that we brought up for that. We and Al Dente Rigamortis, as always, we have a Patreon. If you'd like to support us, it's $2 to $5 tiers. Select the backer tier you'd like to support us at. We have extra content, early access, special content, and thank you for being a patron. The ones that are a patron to us, your patronage keeps us going. And for our listeners and to the authors of this story, or of these stories and this story in particular, thank you immensely, because honestly, without you guys, we really wouldn't have much of a show. So thank you. Until next time, I have been your host, Review Cultist.
And I have and will continue to be Adam.
I am Travis today. I might change tomorrow.
And this has been Al Dente Rigamortis. Sleep well.
Night night.